Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets get blown out at home, but the first career start for Noah Clowney does give the fan base optimism about the road ahead. We dive in on the rookie's performance coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use promo code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And Doug, it's not often that you come in on a post game, you take a look at the box score, and you say, listen, lose by 20, 30, 40 points, but it actually still has some good vibes. That's, I think, where we end up as the Nets lose to the Kings, but we get the first start for Noah Clowney.
Yeah, look, tough loss to the Kings, schedule loss to some degree, coming with only 8 guys on the back-to-back, right? Like, it was just going to be against a Kings team that needs to win to kind of keep continuing with their playoff seeding. So this was going to be a pretty big uphill climb altogether. But I think what the weekend showed, and that we'll get into here, is that there is sort of an appetite among like the fan base and just getting to basic excitement levels around seeing some new players, around having a different energy, around just seeing sort of different combinations and maybe what the future can hold. And that was really ultimately the theme of the weekend, was that like new faces, young blood, new energy, season effective or is over, but they didn't play like it was. And I think that that's like a pretty important takeaway to just kind of walk with us.
Sorry, because
it's all right.
The iron, no, because it's, you said the season is over, but they didn't play that way. If they had played like the season wasn't over, when the season wasn't over, maybe the season wouldn't be over. As I know, but you are correct in that. And then we talk about these things all the time, and what they chose to do and not do over the course of this season. But these can be meaningful, meaningless games at the end of this year, based on what some of these young players do, and Noah Clowney is chief among them. Now, this game we'll talk about, he does play 35 minutes in this particular performance, but more importantly was coming out of Saturday, where the Nets not only come back in that game when Detroit's playing absolutely nobody, but you also get Noah Clowney giving you a performance and being the catalyst for that comeback, as he ends up with the line there, 30 minutes. Gives you what do you end up knocking down there? I have lost the box score.
No, he played against the Pistons. He played 24 minutes, 17.6 rebounds, 4 blocks. A lot of it came in the second half. He had a couple just like highlight reel blocks. He had one stretch where it was like 3-pointer, shot at the rim, block, and another couple points too. Like really just was the spark plug that got the Nets going to be able to erase basically a 19-point deficit, 38-20 in the fourth quarter, and were able to storm all the way back, somehow win that game by 10. I mean, they were getting totally dumpstered by a bad Pistons team. Yeah, but Clowney was for sure the story. Just being able to sort of see him for longer stretches, see it was building off the game against the Pacers. See, he looks incredibly comfortable for a 19-year-old on the court right now. And there's a lot to sort of build off of there. Like 19 years old doing the stuff that he was doing, like 19 years old as the 20th in the 20s pick, right? Too. It's like not a 19-year-old pick 5th or something like that with like insane pedigree. Like this guy's made massive leaps over the course of this year. And it's just one of those things, I think, as we head into the offseason, for a team that needed, and a fan base that needed so badly something to hang their hat on here, like going into next year, like Clowney is like beginning to start to represent that. Interestingly enough, I think it's surprising based on sort of how the rest of the season has gone, but it's totally warranted because his play over these last 3 games specifically has been like pretty eye-opening, and it's really, really encouraging.
I got myself caught reading the, first letters of C. You start reading the Claxton line. You wonder, I know that can't be right, though. I don't think it was 2 of 4 for Noah Clowney on that Saturday night game. And it is, and it's funny, too, because when you think about where Clowney came from in the G League, you can go back and look at where his three-point shooting was. The percentage in totality doesn't tell you the whole story because he actually was shooting closer to 50% as he got ready to the point where they brought him up here for the NBA roster to finish out the season. And that's carried over, knocking down perimeter shots. You mentioned coming off the bench there in that game, shoots 2 of 3 from deep. So when you can carry over those type of things and offer the versatility, offer the switchability, playing at the 4, then you get into this game and you say on the back-to-back with only 8 players available, so he gets to start, quote, at the 5. So you're just getting a bigger sample size on him. And rather than, maybe we'll talk about in the back end of this episode, the decision making around how the Nets choose to develop their young players that fans can get frustrated by, I'm taking all positives here because he is playing now, and you have a few more games before the season is over, and hopefully he strings them together. I did think it was also a good test here at the NBA level to play 30 minutes on Saturday, 35 the very next night on Sunday against the Kings. You can see it. 19-year-old, slight frame, like it's going to wear you down. Taking on Sabonis is going to be a challenge for you, but it's good to see Noah Clowney be able to play at that level and respond to some of those, even if it isn't going to be perfect. As we've said before, it's not going to be perfect every night for him, but I like the idea that we're going to talk about him getting 6, 7, 8 games consecutively as this season comes to a close.
Yeah, like if you take his last 4 games, which has been like right where he's started playing real rotation minutes, like, closing against the Pistons, obviously playing huge minutes here against the Kings. But it really started with the Pacers on Wednesday, where he goes for 22 and 10 and 17 minutes. Like that's where we're like, okay, hey, there's like really something here. If you look at his last 4 games where he's really playing real rotation minutes, his per 30 numbers are 21 points and 9 rebounds per 30 minutes. I mean, this is really very encouraging. 2 of those games, or excuse me, 3 of those games against teams that are for sure trying. 2 of the games against the Pacers and then the Kings here were teams that, like, it's hard to, like, the Pistons game is just, that's what it is. Like the Pistons are basically trying to lose, but the other 3 games are against, like, playoff teams that go into the playoffs that are still playing the string out here because they have to, they are are working on their seeding. This is really, really encouraging. And it's so crazy too. It's so easy to forget, like, this guy, how crazy young he is. I was looking this up the other day, and Noah Clowney was born a year after LeBron was drafted. Like, this guy is,
like, we know he's young
nuts.
and we know those things work, but that's a really good way to frame it because LeBron is LeBron and we still associate him as being
playing.
The brain.
LeBron gets drafted in 2004, and Clowney, it's a year and a month after, is born. Like, he's really, really, really young. And just to be able to see the comfort level that he's been able to establish, just be able to see that, like, I think it's helpful too. And we'll talk about development. Maybe I'll hold this thought about development because I'm going to talk about, like, why this kind of trajectory actually makes a little sense. I think maybe more than maybe in other versions where the fan base has gotten really frustrated in the past, that this specific timing might make sense. So I'll hold that here for a second. But in general, like, what we've seen from him over these last 4 games, above the break threes, getting more comfortable in the pick and roll. I mean, excellent instincts around the basket in terms of blocking shots, especially like weak side shot blocking. Like, stuff that you just, like, can't really teach, or you can teach it, but it makes it a lot easier if the guys, like, can kind of just display some of it. And I think, like, that's really where we are right now. And I think, like I said, it's easily the most exciting thing, probably outside of, like, some Cam Thomas run that's happened this season for the Nets.
Yeah, and that's why coming up here in a second, as Doug says, this developmental track for Noah Clowney. Why can this be successful for him? And I'll remind the fan base, while you may want to have seen younger players sooner, there is a explanation as to why this is the path that the Nets choose time and time again. I'll attempt to defend that stance here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Look, get up in the action over here on Prize Picks. You win 100 times your money. Taking the world's best players, you're taking the game to a whole new level during the basketball postseason. All you're doing on Prize Picks, you're going more or less on the Prize Picks projections for the NBA. That's points, assists, rebounds, blocks, steals. You're putting together different players. You're putting together different statistics. And like I said, can win up to 100 times your money over there on Prize Picks. They have quick withdrawals, get easy gameplay, enormous selection of players and stat types. It makes Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. They got weekly promotions going all the time, as well as special offers for the biggest moments in sports. Prize Picks has it all. They've really made daily fantasy just so easy. You download the Prize Picks app today. You use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You're going to get a first deposit match up to $100. You download the Prize Picks app. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA. Get a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
All right, so as we continue on the post-game episode for the Locked On Nets podcast and for the Brooklyn Nets, by the way, yes, they lost 107-77. It was a 40-point deficit when it was all said and done. And I do enjoy engaging with fans sometimes on social media. Humor doesn't always land well. When they were down 20, pushing through the fourth, I said it might be too soon to call it. I am feeling shaky about Brooklyn, and I got several, dude, the game's over. And I just want everyone to know I was well aware. We will talk about Jalen Wilson, Noah Clowney, Mikal Bridges, Dennis Schroeder, Thomas being the starting five in this one. There's a really, I think, a very positive interaction if you want to look at Kevin Ollie and you want to look at players like Schroeder and the way that they handled Trendon Watford coming out of a messy turnover in this game as well. But I'll let you take the lead on why does this developmental path make sense for Noah Clowney with how the Nets have approached it this year.
So, right. So, like, when you get to this part of the season and you see Clowney playing really well, the instinct is to say, why hasn't he played all year? I mean, even Richard Jefferson said it on the broadcast, and that's a fair critique. I think it's very easy to say Nets have needed guys like this. They needed energy. Why hasn't he played? And I get why that's the instinct. Frankly, it was my instinct also. But the more I've thought about it, specifically with Clowney, now I wouldn't necessarily say this with all players, but specifically with Clowney, one, he's very young, like I said. Two, he was very raw. I mean, coming in, like we just saw even in the summer league, where the summer league's not great for bigs, especially because it's just hard. And, it just didn't look very easy for him. But specifically, I think it was smart, probably now that I think about it, to not really throw him into the fire early. And because now we're at a point of the season where the season's effectively over, you are allowed to go make mistakes, and it's probably not going to impact your playing time because the stakes have lowered, right? There's a real world downside where he starts playing meaningful rotation minutes in January, let's say, where this games still really matter, where like they're still fighting for the play-in. And like, even though we kind of saw the writing on the wall, I mean, February, even March, like even when we can kind of see the writing on the wall, what would not have been worth it is if he comes in there, struggles, and then they have to kind of effectively bench him again, right? Because it's not because like he can't help them, quote unquote, win. And now you have like another issue. I think it's a lot easier now to come into this, especially for his age, and just to say, just go out and do what you want to do. Like the games do not matter as much. You're not going to lose your minutes. You're not going to lose your rotations. We're not fighting and clawing here. Just go out and play. You know what I mean? Like, I think him specifically, there's been other guys where I would not make that claim. I think for him specifically, this is just fine. And that would be my pushback on anyone who's like, come on, why you haven't seen him? The Nets screwed up again. I don't think that's the case here.
And intellectual honesty, we said this, and I said this because I won't put it on for both of us. Heading towards the trade deadline, I said, hey, as you're approaching this trade deadline, you should go ahead and utilize this opportunity. Maybe just give Noah Clowney a little bit of a taste. Maybe you'll be ready to bring him up here, and that can inform the decisions you make. Dorian Finney-Smith specifically, right? Can we be flexible with what we have here? Jalen Wilson, push for that as well. And to your point, we've seen this immediately. Should have been here the whole time. But I also think that when we highlight some of the stuff on a game-to-game basis now with him, his instincts around the basket, some natural ability to block shots, some of the understanding of where to position himself when he's off ball, make himself available, getting rebounds, right? Gets 10 rebounds in this game tonight, even though he only ends up with 7 points. All of those things are much easier to develop and instill and put the process in place when you're doing it at the G League, right? So just to your point, would I have loved to have seen him earlier? Of course.
Sure.
But if I had to have watched him, and Jalen Wilson has had a little bit of a mini version of this, right? Comes and looks incredibly electric from beyond the arc and then settles back in. And now he's come up a little bit. It's easy now when the season is lost and Ben Simmons got hurt and you're not in the play-in battle and the season is over before the season's actually ended to look back and say you should have played him the whole time. There were points, at least 40 games through, 45 games through when the agenda of this season was still intact. It went off the rails completely. And that's where you can't do the retroactive and say, well, look what the record is now. That's why you should have done this then. It does. Some level of it took time to get to that place, even if we all agree the Nets were slow moving on when to make that switch.
And there's like, I will say there is like some damage that could be done from that too, right? Like it's where it's just, you play some bad games, now you're benched, now you're back in the G League, and then your confidence is kind of shot. Like I think the trajectory here or the graph has worked out fine. And I think I'm just going to stop and like not really complain too much about like they would have been in the playoffs. That's just not probably true. Right. And so like, I don't think he's not like a game swinger, like not going to swing 6 games for them or something like that. I don't think that's a realistic take. And so therefore at that point to say, hey, these are like pretty low stress, decent quality minutes to get here at the end of the season. I think we've got a good set of tape to look at now and be like, hey, there's a lot to build off of and get excited about. And I think with a young player like that, like that's exactly what you want. What you don't want is a ton of games. It's been super up and down. His confidence is kind of shot. The team's still where it's going to be. And maybe someone else wants to say, this differently, but I don't know. I think for me, I'm just going to kind of go with this and be like, I don't know if I can just do we do retroactive stuff all the time. It's not even that. It's just, I think in this specific situation, the more I thought about it, I'm like, oh, this is just good. I think this is like a good little story to tell yourself at the end of the season with him. And that can just be what it is.
Yeah, and too, because like if you want, the picture I would paint is we'll trade Dorian Finney-Smith, have Jalen Wilson play more, then you make space on the roster to bring up Noah Clowney as well, and you start to think about how that unfolds. But I think it's okay just to take away the value that we saw in these minutes, and then hopefully. But here's the other thing too that I'll save this for the third segment in terms of the overall, because I do think comparing these players specifically with rookies the Nets have had in the past, it's not all apples to apples. But I do have I do have a narrative that I don't think the fan base is necessarily going to love. The one other note here, just in this game specifically and over the weekend, is too, remember, Jalen Wilson gets the start in this mix as well. We see these guys get to play off of one another. This was an example where you don't have any Nicholas Claxton in there. So I also like the idea of just, hey, here's a really tough assignment against Sabonis. Here's some big guys you have to go against. And frankly, this is a side note for the game overall. Guess what? Rookies, you're not going to get a lot of love when it comes to the referees. Like, there's a handful of plays where it's like, hey, you're 19 years old and weigh 120 pounds soaking wet. When you get hip checked out of the paint by Sabonis, we're going to go ahead and assume that you're just too soft and you don't quite know how the game works. You're still seeing that happen with Cam Thomas right now, where the fouls just don't go that way for them. And that's a part of the learning curve too. And taking an entire season to that beating, whether you're Noah Clowney or we're seeing Cam Thomas, those are hard, man. Like those are hard lumps and lessons to kind of learn here along the way.
And this is like, the Sabonis one specifically is like one of the harder matchups for a guy like Clowney in all of basketball. He's a really versatile player. He's got great vision. He's super smart. He's very like sort of methodical in his play, and he's going to punish you for mistakes. Like he's not a top 20 guy in the league, but he's not far away, but he's a singular kind of problem. Right. And he's like just the kind of problem for a big guy like Clowney that's going to cause him issues, right? Like you get too close and they're going to back cut you, right? Like you got the guard as the low man. Well, he's going to put you into the basket. Like they did that a bunch of times. He's going to get you going up and down. He can get to the rim and use the size and he's a strong guy too, to sort of finish in and around you. So yeah, the Sabonis thing is, Sabonis played a really good game. This is a really hard assignment for Clowney to walk in there and like play, affect. They did pair him a little bit with Sharp here, but like to effectively play, 30 plus minutes of just pure center against the guy who's like really, really good at this. This was not an easy assignment. I think he was overmatched for sure, but most people are against Sabonis. So it's like not necessarily a knock.
Overmatched by Sabonis.
And I thought the Nets actually had like a decent strategy early on. They fronted him a lot. They ran like they would early front him and then like sort of scram back to like shooters to try to just make up the distance. It worked a little bit to start. Then they just got overwhelmed by it and they just really couldn't keep up.
All right, coming up here in a second, let's talk about, I think, a teachable moment for one Trendon Watford here in this game that I liked seeing from both Dennis Schroeder and also from Kevin Ollie. And then high level, is the developmental strategy the Brooklyn Nets take basically across the board with their young talent always correct? We'll dive into that coming up next.
All right, before we get to that, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster, and you'll love this, for free. LinkedIn Jobs is not just another job board. LinkedIn is a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you just can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all this while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That's less than a day for all you math nerds out there. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a new feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, so as we button up the 107-77 loss for the Brooklyn Nets against the Kings on their home court, rookies, young players, developing young players. There was a fourth quarter, I believe, here. Trendon Watford, miscommunication with Dennis Schroeder, just kind of whips one out of bounds, and it goes to a timeout. And you see Schroeder, and we've been complimentary about him. Veteran, he's bringing the guys together in timeouts. Seems like he's trying to communicate, always giving the effort that you want to see from everybody down the stretch. And he says something. And I've also noticed that Dennis Schroeder does not seem to have any problem telling everybody, teammates and otherwise, where he thinks they should be, whatever. I'm saying this positively. Trendon Watford didn't seem to appreciate that. He goes to go to the bench. Kevin Ollie is like, hey, stick here with me for a second. And Watford's like, nah, I don't want to stay here. I'm going to keep going. And to Kevin Ollie's credit, he pulled him back in. And Richard Jefferson, I thought, did a really good job on the broadcast of iterating as a former player what was happening there. He did not start to talk to him about that exchange and the bad pass. As Jefferson put it, he brought him back in, Ollie, brought in Watford, and said, I'm going to talk to you about something else that was going on there. You're jacked up. You're feeling energetic. It's a bad play there. I don't care about that. But here we go. Let's get right back into learning and developing. And then you see him have a good exchange with Schroeder where they go back and forth too. I know that fans will probably say, who cares about these types of things? But guess what? There's other ways that end of seasons go where nobody cares, or there's an outburst like that, and it just goes by the wayside, and you start to think about Trendon Watford maybe in a little bit of a different way as the season winds down.
Yeah, I think that that was an interesting moment. It was a little weird, I think, because it didn't feel like it was a moment for tensions to really rise. I kind of thought that everyone sort of got what was happening here, and it was just clearly a mistake. And it wasn't like everyone else in the team had played some flawless game. And I mean, Schroeder, to his credit, was 1 for 12 in this game. So it wasn't like he was it wasn't like he was
part. He's doing his part.
It wasn't like he was having the game of his life here, and Watford just kind of got in the way of him dropping a 50 ball or something like that. Like he had made one shot. Right. Maybe he's just frustrated because of that, right? He's 1 for 12. It's been horrible.
Watford tied for a team high, by the way, though, with Cam Thomas, 18 shot attempts. So you got to appreciate that.
Yeah, so you're right. So I think, maybe it was just a little stuff boiling over, but
yeah.
I think in general, I will say one thing in general that this team has lacked all year is emotion. We've seen almost no emotion this year from some good emotion,
other
but
than Nick
no
Claxton.
one what's that?
Other than Claxton, and sometimes, and then when he's doing, you'd be like, well, I don't even know why he's being so emotional. But at least he
does something dumb and gets a tech or something like that, and it just seemed it wasn't worth it at all. And it was the weird kind of emotion where it's not really rallying anybody. It's just him kind of hanging on the rim too long, or pushing somebody as he dunks on them, or doing something weird, and then all of a sudden you have a technical foul. This team is just, we just haven't seen any of it. There's, the guys don't seem to argue with each other. It doesn't seem like there's been very few reasons to get really, excited about stuff too. But no one's ever seemed to get all that mad about what's happening, which has been a frustrating experience, I think, from the outside looking in and say, is anyone mad about this? The season going like this? And even all that being said, that moment with Schroeder and Watford did seem a little weird, but I wonder if there is this still little bits of, hey, this season's been bad and we're kind of still frustrated by this.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, and Watford's having a good run late in the season, and Schroeder more than lived up to expectations coming over once you get him in from the trade, and it ends up not meaning anything in the end, right? For both these players. It's a bad night for Schroeder, but Watford's trying to put together some good minutes. He's probably been frustrated thinking he deserves more run over the course of the season. Schroeder's here and going, okay, I'm missing the playoffs. I'm a veteran. I'm not going anywhere. So you miss a pass out of bounds. I turn, I say, hey, buddy, a little bit of this. And then it turns into more than you would ever think it would be, because we could give you 1,000 examples when players should have been in each other's throats over the course of the season, and it never happened. At a high level, to close things out here, we talked about at the top Noah Clowney and this developmental track, which makes sense. He's young. You're trying to get there. I do sometimes, and I wonder about it. I'll use Cam Thomas because he's the prime example. We sit here and say that he should have been playing so much sooner, and he should have. But from a fundamental perspective, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, this is their model. They did it with Claxton. They do it with Day'Ron. They did it with Cam. They did it with Jalen Wilson. They did it with Noah Clowney, right? Like, it seems like they fundamentally believe that we want to refine some things inside of our young players' games before we get them to a place where we're going to put them out there at the NBA level. I'm not saying I always agree with it across the board, but this is, I think, a disconnect with the fans saying, as we said, should have played all season long. No, you disagree maybe with how they develop their young players. It doesn't mean that it makes it the wrong path. It's just one that is sometimes frustrating, I think, to deal with, especially when a season like this is unraveling. Or has unraveled.
Yeah, and the problem is, like, the Cam Thomas stuff is still so fresh in everyone's mind, where I think that went beyond just like, hey, we're working on development. I think they actually just had like internal disagreements about who he was, and they weren't sure.
That throws it off completely.
And I think like that was beyond just like a development track. That was like, we disagree. We've sort of made promises to some of these other guys about starting time and minutes. You know, we signed some of these guys to contracts.
We have superstars here. Like,
they need to play more.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I think there was all these other things going on, and I would put it outside the development track. With Claxton and Sharp and stuff, yeah, they've always been a little slow. Sometimes there's been some stuff in there, like Claxton like had injuries and was got like the illness for a while, right? So he wasn't able to sort of keep a steady pace. And then Sharp has like been in and out, looked like he was progressing, and now he kind of looks like he might be on his way. It's like hard to tell where they think. But the other thing to remember is too, the Nets really haven't had many chances to develop guys because they don't really draft. So we don't even, we just named all the examples.
I wasn't giving you a short list of like plucking out key guys. I named everybody basically.
That was the whole list. We just gave it to you. The whole list of guys that they've drafted, basically, that they've been able to sort of like think about developing. And then the other guy was the only other draft pick literally was Kessler Edwards, and they waived him outright. So it's not like we have this massive body of work to draw on and be like, this is how they do stuff with players. It's 4 guys. Yep. Right, and 3 of them are bigs, so it's not like we just have this. I think to me it'd be more about lack of sample size than really knowing. I think with each one I can say sort of makes sense. That one was confusing. This one had some context. This one was blocked. You know, I mean, that's like those are the stories for most of these guys. And I do think probably if we were to take the sample size out, they probably would be a little slower on the development, but maybe not if they drafted in the top 5 2 years in a row because they were tanking and they had like, you know, Brandon Miller or Wembanyama or these other guys.
Prospects need more time to develop than top 5 prospects, right?
Totally. Who are just like NBA ready out of the box. And they just haven't had those guys either. So I think it's probably a mix of everything.
Couple quick notes here. 1, Kessler Edwards, perfect. 2 for 2 from the field, 1 for 1 from beyond the arc, and 1 for 1 at the line in his 4 minutes of action, 6 points. I don't know. Off season, I'm just saying, what would it take to get him back in the building? And then just for me, you know, I've had a hard time wrapping my head around it. Fans talk about it a lot. We've discussed it. But listen, when you see Mitchell 28 minutes, 3 of 8, you know, 12 points, I get why the Nets are saying put some of those Phoenix picks together and go get this kid. It really adds up to me.
Davion, you know what? I saw you post that and I didn't get it till right now when you said it. I was like,
dude, sometimes I'm operating too high because too high of a level because nobody really embraced that either when it came out the first time. But I doubled down. When the joke doesn't land, I even get the joke. I assume it's the audience.
I even understand you, and I didn't get that one. Okay, look, tomorrow we got a good one because we're gonna come back. They don't play again until Wednesday. We're gonna come back and talk about why these last couple games prove that the Nets made another mistake in not going for a rebuild. And there's some very clear, I'll just call it energy reasons why. Some of the we'll toss out some of the straw man arguments about why the Nets shouldn't have rebuilt when it comes to the fan base, and give the fan base out there, like you folks out there, a little more credit around understanding like sort of what we're kind of rooting for and wanting to see on the basketball court in these last couple of games, even with a loss, have for sure proven. So we'll get into that later on this week.
You better believe it, my friends. Hey, if you said goodbye to me tonight, there would be music left to write. What else could I do? I'm so inspired by you. That is Willie Joel.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We're back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, 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 basketball.